Hello, everybody. Welcome. So if you're here live, I'd love to have you pop into the comments and say hello. Let me know what you are hoping to get out of today's little mini taster class. So let's get started. And if you're watching in the replay, also feel free to pop in and say hey. So, hey, David. Hey, Fran. Nice to see you here. So my name is Julie, and I teach a class called Design Bootcamp, and it is a 5-week course. It's an intensive class, and today I'm going to give you a little taste of what it's like and tell you a little bit about the class. Feel free to hop into the comments if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. And let's just go ahead and get started. So I put together a quick presentation, and one of the things to know about Design Bootcamp is that most of the lessons are delivered via kind of presentations like you're going to see today with slides and stuff like that. So first thing to know is this is me. This is some work that I created in the last 2 months. And you can see I do a lot of painting, printmaking, and collage. Those are my primary areas of interest. And so the bad news is if you want to create work like this, that's not what Design Bootcamp is like. And the good news, if you don't like this artwork, is you're not going to create artwork like this. That is not what Design Bootcamp is about. So let's go ahead and take a peek about what Design Bootcamp is about. So like I said, you're not going to make work like mine. The focus in Design Bootcamp is really on making work that is yours. And if you don't know what that means, part of the process of this workshop is really figuring out what that means through all of the class exercises and all of the lessons. Many of the demonstrations I do are based in painting, collage, and printmaking because that's my personal areas of chosen practice. But there have been many Design Bootcamp participants who have done other kinds of art. Zentangle, felting, sculpture, all kinds of stitch-related things, quilting. There was even someone who did glass fusing. I think there was a weaver. So the fact of the matter is that the elements and principles of design really apply to every kind of art that you can imagine making, okay? So you're going to learn about the elements and principles of art, just like I said. Now, if you don't want to take this class, the elements and principles of art are readily available to you through YouTube videos, through books, through lots of stuff. This is not hidden information. What this class does is really about taking those ideas, breaking them down, and making them really sort of usable. And I think that's what I said in the sentence here, which is what are they and how can they be applied to your art making practice, right? So we're really talking about practical applications of these kind of intellectual ideas. There is a lot of homework. It's called boot camp, not because we're doing push-ups, so to speak, but we are doing artistic calisthenics, right? And after every class, there are going to be multiple assignments that you need to complete before the first class. So before the next class. So that's just to know that, do you have time in your life for sitting down and really doing all of the homework that you need to do? And the other thing is that we do a lot of talking. Now, the reason for this, there are multiple reasons, but one of the things that I believe very hard, very seriously in my soul as one of the truths of the art universe is that if you can talk about something, then you can fix it. If you can't talk about it, if you can't verbalize it, if you can't say why you like or you don't like something, then there's really no way to address the problem and you really can't fix it. So we talk and talk and talk and talk and talk to try to find the terms and the methods, you know what I mean, for fixing things. And part of what the elements and principles do is give you something to hang on to so that you can say, oh, this is this principle. This is that element that I need. And it really helps you verbalize all of that stuff. But I do want to point out that this means that you're going to be talking about other people's artwork and they're going to be talking about your artwork. And it's a really safe, wonderful space. We've always had so many people that are so supportive and lovely. But I know that some people don't like to expose themselves that way. So that's just to know about class. And as with so many things, you get out of design boot camp what you put into it. And that's that whole, like, you don't have to do all the homework. I'm not your mom. I'm not going to come to your house and yell at you if you don't do all the homework. I'm not even going to give you a stern looking class. It's up to you whether or not you do the homework, but you will get more out of class if you do the assignments. Okay. Live classes are conducted over Zoom. They're not recorded. And this goes back to creating a safe space. We have had plenty of times where people have cried or shared really personal information, because art is really about you and it can be very personal. So I don't like to have the recordings because I like it to stay within the people in the room, so to speak, in the Zoom room. So that's why they're not recorded, but Zoom is really easy. You can see everybody's face. It's really nice. I think we're far enough along in pandemic land that we probably have all been on a Zoom recording at some point. So hopefully you know exactly what that's like. And then you're also going to have access to a private online classroom for discussion assignments and sharing a file. So previously, I have always conducted all of the discussion and file sharing on Slack. And if you know Slack, it's sort of like texting on steroids. But they changed some of their rules. So I started to look around for new software, and I found something I really like called Basecamp. And this is basically what the classroom or the Basecamp classroom looks like. You can see there's a message board, which works like any traditional message board where you can like leave a message and people can respond in the thread. There's this really cool thing, which is schedule, which could also be called calendar. That's the one in the middle there. And what that is you can actually sync it with your Outlook, your iCal, your Google Calendar, whatever. And so all of the class assignments and all of the class dates go into your calendar that way. So that's really nice if you want to do that. And then the docs and files section, everybody in class gets their own folder where you can upload all of your homework assignments, the images of your work you want to share, all that kind of other stuff. And then there's like a message board under it so people can leave comments if they want to, which is great. Then there's a chat, which works very much like the chat here on YouTube, which is kind of very stream of consciousness, just sort of, chitter chattering about whatever, because it's nice to get to know the people in your little pod here. And then finally, there's a homework board where all of the homework assignments will appear so that you will know exactly what you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what the online classroom aspect of it looks like. Pretty easy, pretty fun, lots of stuff. You can see there are a lot of people already in the classroom. I'm running 2 different design boot camp pods, essentially. One meets from 12 to 2 and one meets from, I think it's 7 to 9. So the class that's from 12 to 2 only has 1 spot left, and the class that's from 7 to 9 has, I think, maybe 5 spots left. So if you want those, grab them. Okay. Next, who is Design Bootcamp for? I don't know why that slide is so big that the top doesn't show, but the top should say, who is Design Bootcamp for? So this is just sort of a stream of consciousness as I was thinking about who I think would sort of benefit from the class. This is one of the questions I get a lot. Are you supposed to be a beginner? Are you supposed to be an expert? And I will say, like, I've had people who went to art school who have MFAs, who have had an art practice for 20 years. I have had people who are brand new. I've had people who are card makers. I've had people who are quilters. So there's not like, it's not so much a matter of experience and how much you've done. It's more of the quality of your person in terms of who I think is really successful with Design Bootcamp. So some things like, you want to make your own unique work, meaning you don't want to copy anymore, right? You want to make your own work. You want to feel in control of the art making process. I happen to believe that sort of intuitive painting is a bunch of hooey, shall we say, because in order to intuitively paint, I think you really have to base it in some knowledge. I believe you can intuitively paint once you have the knowledge, but before that, really, really hard to do it. You're excited by the idea of getting back to basics. You want to feel confident about your choices when making art. You sometimes have indecision panic. I don't know if anybody else has this, but you're not sure which way to go. Should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And it can be a little paralyzing. You enjoy learning. I mean, this is a class, and I don't think necessarily that everybody enjoys the process of learning, of sort of being filled up and sort of processing through, but you need to enjoy learning. You're ready to move your artwork to the next level. In fact, you're kind of probably hoping for that and you're just not sure how to get there. You enjoy using your intellect when creating. We talk a lot, and like I said, digest a lot of information. You're looking for a foundation upon which to build an art practice. You're open to new ideas. You sometimes struggle with knowing if artwork is done. Bootcamp can really help with that. You're not sure if you have a personal style or how to get one. You want to make better work. You're frustrated with what you're currently making. You feel like there's a gap in your art education, or it's been a while since you've really been through all of those basics. So that's the kind of person, if that sort of fits you, who I think, who I really designed Design Bootcamp for, is what I would say. Is that too many times using the word design, maybe? Okay, so what is Design Bootcamp like? Well, now let's get into it. So we're going to talk about, again, I don't know why my slides are cutting off in such a funny way. We're going to talk about value with the E on the second line. So let's talk about value. This is a value scale. What is value? Oh, I'm so glad that you asked. So value is the lightness or darkness in color, and the lightest value is white and the darkest value is black. You can see that, right? 1 is white and 9 is black. So that's lightest to darkest, right? And value is used to create a focal point within a painting or a drawing. Some people say that value is the single most important thing that you can think about, focus on, learn about in your paintings, because it's basically the structure of your artwork. Now, if you wanted to create a value scale, I'm just going to show you really quickly how you would go about doing that, okay? So on the supply list, I said if you wanted to participate, you need a piece of paper and a pencil, was I think the first 2 things on the list. So let's make a really simple, I have an extra piece of paper here. Let's make a really simple value scale. So we're going to make 1 box, 2 boxes, 3 boxes, 4 boxes, 5 boxes. So this is going to be the white of the paper. So that's really easy. And then this is going to be our darkest. So I'm going to push really, really, really hard with the pencil to try to make this the blackest black that I can possibly do. Then I probably want to do a kind of light shading in here. Then maybe get a little more aggressive in this next box, and then do something that's in between these two right here if I can. Let's see if I can get that a little bit more of a, and then very quickly right there, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 value steps. So if I hold this a little bit closer, in case you missed it, and you hopefully are making your own value scale. Now you can buy value scales from the art supply store if you want, but you can also make them, and you can make them 5, 10, however many steps that you want. But it's good to be able to know, right, how to get the different values that you want. Now I keep saying this word value, 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 value. And we have talked a little bit of what value is, right? It's the lightness or darkness in color. But what does that mean when we actually get into color? I'm so glad that you asked. So every color, otherwise known as hue, has an inherent value, right? And you can see that each of these colors has a different hue and has a different value, okay? But if you look at a color wheel, one of the things that I always think is really interesting about this is that, yes, all the colors are different, but look at many of the values are the same. Like I think these two are definitely close over on the right side, like the orange and the red orange, maybe even the regular orange too. Definitely the violet and the green are the same value. The blue violet's coming in there as well. So value and color are different. Color sort of has all the fun and value does all the work. That's the way they put it. Value is the structure. It's the scaffolding. It's the bones. It's the architectural plan. It's what you hang all the pretty colors on top of in order to create structure in your artwork. And it is one of the elements of art, okay? So this is a Matisse painting. This is from his Fauvist period. If you don't know, Fauvism was an art movement, and it sort of roughly translates, my understanding is, to sort of the wild beasts. And to us, to our modern eye, this doesn't look particularly crazy, but in the time, the idea of painting her face with green and all these weird gaudy colors all over her was sort of horrifying and terrible. But the thing that is so interesting about it is if you look at the values, well, she's a very boring sort of regular lady, right? There's nothing actually sort of odd about the painting at all. The structure of the painting is completely normal, right? The way that sort of the background blends, you know, together, like there's no value difference, even though there's all these colors. There's very, very minor value difference sort of around her face, which is great. It brings attention to her face, but sort of across the background, there's no value difference. So again, value is creating the structure, the large white area over her shoulder, all those many colors sort of in her shawl. They don't show up in when you're looking at the value, right, of it. And so it's a nice, clean, beautiful scaffolding on which all this pretty frippery has been hung. So that's what value sort of does for your artwork. So I think it's important now to talk about how you get value in colors. And how you get value in colors is starting with tints and shades. What are tints and shades? I'm so glad you asked, and there's a little chart here for you. So tints, right, this is the bottom row. You can see that are made by adding white to a color. So here's the color, and you add white, 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 white until you get all the way to white. Shades are made by adding black. So you have the color, and then you add black, 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 black until you get all the way right to black. So again, tints are adding white, shades are adding black, and that's how you're changing the value of the color. If we were to look at this in grayscale, you'd be able to see that the value was changing, okay? So now it gets a little confusing because there's something else in here, which is called toning, and toning is messing with saturation. So hue is the pure pigment with nothing added to it. And saturation defines the brilliance and intensity of a color. So it's the pure hue to gray. You can see there, this is toning your hue. It's adding gray. So tint adding white, tone adding gray, black, okay, adding or shade, which is adding black. This is the way that you create a value scale of a single color. So I have an example here, and I'll show you a little bit more in a second. But I have an example right here in front of me that I want to show you, which is also another exercise that we can easily do really quickly. So I have just like a big book of color wheels that I've made and color charts, but also in here, I have these tinting, right, toning and shading charts that I've done. So for example, this is one color. This is Liquitex Primary Red. This is when I shaded it. This is when I tinted it. This is when I toned it. So all of these colors, right, are just from this one base color and then adding black, white, or gray. And so with some of these strips that I have here, you can see, for instance, that I've written that this is tinting 1 part nickel azo yellow and 1 part teal. So this is the original color. And then I just kept adding white, and this is what I got. You know, and I have little notes to myself everywhere so that if I say like, oh, I want this color, how am I going to get this color? I don't get it out of a tube, right? I can see that I'm tinting 2 parts quin magenta, 1 part nickel azo gold. So that makes this color. And then you add white to get it to where I want it to be. And then I know because white is in it that it's going to be lighter on that value scale. So these are the kind of reference tools that you will make in Design Bootcamp, and they're really easy to do. So let's do one super quick together. I know I said you needed acrylic paint, black and white, and then your favorite color. So just pick one color. I'm just trying to get my palette out here. So I have my palette. I prefer to use gray palette paper because I think you see the color better. And then I am going to use this Pyrrole Orange. And I'm just going to put out a little bit because we're just going to play for a minute here so that you can see some of how this works in real time. So I have some white paint that I'm going to put out. And I'm going to put out some black paint as well. And maybe I'm going to put out some black paint. Oh, my black is being recalcitrant. Okay. And then I have some gray. Oops, I've gotten myself covered in paint already and I've hardly done anything. Okay, so, and then I'm going to put out a little bit of gray, or you can mix the gray if you don't have gray paint just by mixing equal parts white and black, and you'll get a nice mixing gray. So I'm just going to put out a little bit of gray. And there is actually a color called mixing gray, which is usually a nice 50-50 gray. Okay, so I'm going to put out my color. There I can see this is my original color. Now, if I add let's mix up some white added to it. So this is the first tint of this color. And I can see if I can clean off my brush and add some white to sort of step that tint even more. Whoa, that's a really pretty peach. Who knew? And then I'm going to kind of try to clean the paint off my brush, and just using what's in my brush, I'm going to, again, so that hopefully I'm getting more white each time. I'm not sure I got enough white in that one. Let's see if it is lighter. Oh, it is. There you go. So here's a real quick, you can see the tint. We went from here to here to here to here, just adding white, 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 white. So let me clean off my brush on my under paper and then in some water so that I really get the paint out of my brush. Let's see. And then I'm going to dry my brush off just to make sure that it's nice and ready to go. Okay, so my brush is dry-ish. And again, here is our base color. It's a beautiful orange. Let's add a little bit of black. Mix it up. Now, a little bit of black goes a long, long ways. What a different color already. You can see immediately, right? That orange is obviously in the brown family. Again, we're going to add a teeny bit of black. You'll notice that I mix in the same spot when I'm shading because, again, the black somehow is much more overpowering, I find. Oh, I guess I didn't add enough. Then the white. So I find it's okay to be a little more conservative with it. So there's a nice color there. Let's see if we can get one more interesting, dark, kind of neutral color. Let's try this again. Oh, that's a pretty color. I know it's funny to say that it's a pretty color because a lot of times we think of these murky colors as not pretty, but you know, this, I don't see how good my camera is, but this is like a beautiful chocolate brown there that you can see. That would be a lovely alternative to using black if you were looking for a dark in your artwork. Okay. So now let's get to the toning. Okay, so I'm just cleaning my brush off on my under paper. I'm going to clean it off with a baby wipe. I'm going to dunk it in some water to clean it, but just try to get it back to a neutral paintbrush. And again, this is sort of an abbreviated version of what a lesson in Design Bootcamp is like. You can see that we go over a lot of big ideas along with plenty of practical applications. So again, here's our regular color. Probably don't need to hold that wet wipe in my hand. Then let's mix in some gray. I'm going to tone that. You can see how it drops the saturation. It just knocks it back. And a lot of times, if you're looking for a more sophisticated palette, you can take any of your paints right out of the tube and add some gray to it. And just that grayed out color is really lovely and sophisticated, I think. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and do some more gray. I think I didn't get enough paint out of my brush. There you go. So there's another step down of saturation. Again, let's get the paint out of the brush, get some more gray. And you can see how as you drop the saturation, it's getting more and more towards a kind of interesting neutral nude. Okay, and you could keep going with that too. But so here is this one color, tinted, shaded, and toned. And even more interesting now, if we take a look at it in grayscale, there you go, you can see now the value differences. You'll notice that reducing the saturation doesn't change the value that much, right? It's really the tinting and the shading that changes the value. Saturation is not the same as value, and I think people confuse it a lot. So that's really, really important to note. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint. I want to show you what I just talked about, which is there's hue on the left, and in the grayscale, you can see that almost all those colors are the same value, right? And there's the saturation scale. And again, somewhat changed in value, right? But not a lot. So again, hue, toning changes the hue, but not necessarily, pardon me, I have hiccups, but not necessarily the value. So let's talk about value a little bit more. These, by the way, are some charts that you can make. So here are the colors to start with. There's a red, a light green, a dark green, and a blue. And then there's the shade, the tone, and the tint. So you can get all of these colors, right, just from that one primary color based on how you mix. This is why I tell people when they come to my art classes, you know, bring a black, a white, and like a couple colors that you like, and you can make anything that you want. You don't need to bring every tube of paint that you have. So if you're a fabric person, value exists in fabric. So here's an example of where I was making a value scale for myself, 6 different value steps. And I basically stitched little samples of these solid fabrics to these different grayscale fabrics to see if I could figure out the scale. I got it a little bit wrong, which you can see here, right? Like definitely there are a couple of them in the lighter ones that should have been moved, but that's a value scale in fabric. If you were quilting and you wanted to know which fabric was which value, you know, this is kind of a cheat sheet. I've done the same with collage paper. Here's an example, the tag on the left, moving from the top white down and then jumping up to the second row and then down to the black. That's a very long value scale of all of these solid pieces of paper. And you can see there's the value scale in grayscale, and here is the collage also in grayscale. And again, value is creating the structure of the artwork, okay? And color is just something sort of that's pretty and fun that you hang it on. Now, one of the things I love to do is to look at artwork. This is a piece by Shelley Garber, and I'm just looking at it. I'm thinking, what is the structure of this work? When I look at the value version of the grayscale version of it, where it's showing me the values, I can see what a simple composition it is, right? It's a really, really simple composition. It looks complicated because of all the different colors and things that are going on. But in the end, when I look at the structure, I can see how simple it is, okay? Picasso is a master of how his paintings look. And the thing that I think is so interesting when you look at his work in grayscale is it looks almost identical to the work in color because he has such a strong sense of simple structure, right? That scaffolding that he's hanging everything on. Here's a piece that I love by Ashley Mary. And, you know, my eye goes right through these pink pieces and to this, like, I don't know, would you call it a tulip or something with the polka dots on it? And when I look at the version that's in value scale, I can see why this very, very busy painting doesn't feel that busy to me, because it's got a lot of mid and dark tones and then just a couple light things that are sort of grouped together nicely to grab your eye and pull you up through the painting really nicely. Okay, Van Gogh also uses value, and you can see how without a question your eye goes to that tall tree against that sky, right? It's there, the light sky, the darker ground, like the whole thing, the structure of the painting is there thanks to value. Kari Kimura is a contemporary painter who I like. This is a circular piece, but something about it feels so active, so in motion. It doesn't feel like a wheel or anything like that. And part of it is because the way she's done the value, it's sort of off kilter. The darker values, the weight of the darker values is kind of on the edges. It's got these threads coming through it. And actually these dark values, you've probably heard of the rule of threes, right? It creates a visual triangle that keeps your eye moving around, which is really great too. Monet with this lovely piece here, which no doubt is about a man in a boat, especially when you look at it in the grayscale value version, where you really just see that that boat is the thing that stands out from the rest of the piece. The sky, the water, the buildings, like it, even the sun, it all kind of blends. So here's a recent piece that I sent out to my newsletter subscribers. And the piece on the left is the before, and I wasn't planning on sharing it, so it's not like it's a great photo. It just was a photo I took for me. And I knew that there was something wrong with it, but I couldn't quite figure it out. And on the right is the after. Now, here's the deal if you look at the value differences. It's fine on the left. There is a value difference, but I don't think it's very interesting, right? And this again comes to personal style. I like my work to be like not something you'd see in a doctor's office and kind of be like, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's pretty. I don't want you to sort of glance over it. I want you to be sort of bothered by it or come in really close to see what's happening, or it sort of jangles at you and you have to take a second look. That's my personal thing that I want. So looking at the value structure, I can see exactly what I did, which is I went in and I darkened some values in the bottom and on the right side. And then I added something that had a very high value contrast, a piece of collage paper smack over the divide that's originally was between the high and low value contrast. And if you look at the finished piece here, I think you can see that your eye now moves dynamically around the piece. You sort of come straight into the white piece of paper. You go to the dark area and the other dark area without necessarily being conscious of it, right? Your eye is now moving throughout the piece instead of actually just sort of moving over the piece. And that is all thanks to value. So here's the exercise that we're going to do right now, which is you're going to take a busy piece of paper. It could be anything. I have my art journal here because it has lots of busy pieces of paper in it. It could also be a piece of scrapbook paper, whatever it is that you have. And you're going to check the values using the value scale that you hopefully created along with me. Okay. And then can you now use value to create a clear focal point? So let's take a look and see if we can use value to create a clear focal point. Ooh, big camera. Okay. So let's look at this for a second in grayscale. So now we can kind of look at it and see. So you can see there's kind of a large whitish area, very, very light. Then this is obviously much darker than kind of some mid-tone. That's dark. This is kind of mid-tone. So the real question here is, can I use value to unite these disparate parts? And I think that I can. So I know that I have a lot of like miscellaneous stuff here. This is basically, this was a series of different demos that I did for various things. And it just never coalesced into anything. So even looking at this little reference sheet that I did here, and again, we can look at this in, let's see, saturation. Here we go. We can look at this in grayscale. Now, if I were to add this, it probably wouldn't make a big difference, right? A dark value is not going to help me here. And even a mid-tone value is probably a little too much. I really looks like I want a lighter value in order to sort of draw things together. So let's go ahead and try that out and do it. See if we can use value to get what we want. So I know that I want a kind of lighter value, and I still have some paint left here. So let's see if I can mix up. Let's see if I can mix that up from what's here. So I'm just trying to get towards that sort of peachy color. I might need a little more white. I think I'm still too dark. Maybe I'm not. Let's compare. Maybe a little teeny bit more white. I definitely got too dark in that first pile. Okay. So always buy a big tube of white paint. Okay, that looks nice. So if I want to unify these, let's do, and this is something that we talk about Design Bootcamp too, which is rhythm, which we'll talk about later, but essentially it's the repetition of certain shapes. So I can see that I have like circles here and I have some circles here. So then I'm going to repeat that with another circle. I'm going to pretend that it's like underneath this square. So I'm not going to have it go all the way over so that it goes, where's that square start? Maybe that's fine. And I'll have it maybe go under this black mark too. Okay, so I'm starting to try to unite it with this kind of mid-value circle that's pulling the parts together, hopefully. Then I think if I could add some more of that middle value over here, I could probably lighten up some of this chunk. This is a really uninteresting shape. This is a really uninteresting shape. So what I'm trying to do now is to make a slightly more interesting shape come about over here, which I think, you know, is starting to happen, starting to come through, and that's because of that value change. So let's look at it again in grayscale. Ooh, there we go. And you can see now that it's starting to get a little more united, right? It's starting to be a little less like two separate halves of something that's happening here. I think that what I could do is to bring in some more circles. Do I have a circle stencil somewhere here? I think I do. Okay, so I'm going to bring in some more circles to try to bring that around, and also bring some more different values around. So I want to use slightly darker than this, which I think this is slightly darker. This is slightly darker value. So I'm going to, oh, I'm still in grayscale. Oops. So I'm going to go ahead now into what I think is a slightly darker value. And let's put some circles over this. I might need some more paint to try to get it. Let's get a little more paint on here. Get a little more interest, and again, using value to make my decisions. So this is why I say like intuitive painting is a bunch of whatever, because am I making decisions in the moment? Absolutely. But are they based on something that I'm thinking about? Yeah, I'm keeping value at the front of my mind the whole time, and I'm thinking about it now. And if you're someone who doesn't know what value is, or doesn't understand how to see it or how to use it to your advantage, then how on earth are you going to get the results you want, right? If you don't know any of that stuff, it's just not useful to you. So that's why I think a little bit of knowing is really helpful. So already I feel like this is starting to become a single piece. I think that if I could lighten up some of this, I think that that would also really help. So I'm going to come in mixing some of that lighter value here of that white and orange to get, again, something lighter coming in, coming across, to kind of make this a little less separate. Okay, it's starting to feel like it's coalescing. Let's take a look at it again. And you can see now how value is helping to make this more interesting, to unite the different parts, to make things less separate. We can certainly go like, I like really high contrast. I like really high value contrast too. So we can certainly, do I have a small brush? Smaller. So we can certainly add some really major. Oh, I just pulled the brush. I guess I need to glue that and maybe abuse my brushes a little less. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into my very lightest white and orange right now. So my very lightest, pinkest, closest to kind of white that I can get. So I'm adding a ton of white to get that color. I'm not sure it's even light enough. Let's see if I can add even more white to make it even lighter. There we go. So it's just a pale, pale, pale peach. And I can think about some ways that I could add in a little bit more even of something that is a nice value contrast to help bring things around, to bring the eye around, maybe, you know, adding some little pieces, some little bits. But again, thinking the whole time, not about color, really, really, really about value and how it is being used. So, and even though I'm using this color, if I'm thinking about value, I can take white, which is that lightest value, if I want there to be something light over here, and just sort of scribble to get that lighter look that I'm trying to get. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. But just trying to get some of that light stuff into the conversation here. So let's take another look here. I feel like this is starting to coalesce into something that I'm starting to have focal areas, things that I'm looking at. It's looking less and less like a random pile of stuff, all because I'm really focused on getting the value right. So that's sort of the practical application, right, of how I would use value in it. I think that you've seen a little bit sort of about how class works. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, Design Bootcamp runs once a year and once a year only. Class is starting on February 1st, 2023. There is one spot left in the 12 to 2 section. And I think there are a couple more spots left in the 7 to 9 p.m. That's all Eastern Standard Time. And I think people have said so many great things about the class, that it's life-changing. It changes the way that you see your work. It gives you the vocabulary to talk about your art. All of that is true. Again, there's the online classroom and all the other elements there too. I think that if you're a person who's looking for your own style, if you're looking for more information, if you're looking for more knowledge, if you're looking for just a deeper connection to an art education, that this is a great class for you. If you feel like you're not ready for Design Bootcamp yet, but you're still interested in this kind of stuff, I think you might benefit from my monthly membership program, where I'm still teaching a lot of these basic ideas in a sort of lighter form. So you can check that out at balzerdesigns.com. I want to thank you for being here tonight, whether you're watching live or on the replay. And I hope to see many of you in class. So thanks so much and good night.